Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
It was an ordinary Thursday evening, but things were about to change. My wife, Kathy, and I were in the kitchen, making dinner together. She was chopping onions while I sliced cheese and ham for our omelets. Then, out of the blue, she said something that stopped me cold. "Ben, we've been married for almost 7 years, and we've always been honest with each other, right?" I set down the knife, caught off guard. "Of course," I replied. "Honesty is the foundation of our relationship." Kathy's expression grew serious. "I met someone," she said quietly. A jolt went through me. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I was afraid of what she'd say. She looked away for a moment, then continued. "He's a guy from work. A really nice guy. I've been having lunch with him." My stomach twisted. "Is there more to it? Do you like him?" I asked, holding my breath. She glanced down, guilt written across her face, and nodded softly. I felt a wave of nausea. We needed to talk. I set the knife down and steadied myself, pressing both hands onto the table. "How far has it gone with this guy?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Kathy leaned back against the counter, avoiding my gaze. "We've been having lunch every day for a few weeks," she admitted, "and we had dinner last week when you had a late business meeting." I took a deep breath. "Have you held hands, kissed, or done anything more?" She turned pale, then nodded slowly. "We've kissed." A wave of sickness rolled over me. Did it go further than just a kiss? She looked at me, shook her head, and said, "Not yet." I felt my knees go weak and sank into a chair. "So, you're considering it?" I asked quietly. Her lips tightened, and she gave a stiff nod. "I think so," she whispered. "He wants me to go away with him for a weekend." I could barely get the words out. "Are you going?" She closed her eyes for a moment before answering, "Yes. I don't want to hurt you, but I need to understand what he means to me." "I'm sorry, Ben. I promised him I'd go. I couldn't just leave without telling you." My voice was hollow as I asked, "Where are you going?" "Miami," she replied, barely above a whisper. I forced myself to ask, "Sharing a room, I suppose?" She nodded. "He's booked a suite. And when are you leaving?" "Tomorrow morning." I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "So, you waited until the last second to tell me, huh?" She looked at me, her face tense. "I wanted to be sure I was going through with it before I hurt you." "How considerate of you, Kathy," I said, my voice heavy with sarcasm. "Does he even know you're married?" "Yes, of course," she said defensively. "I always wear my wedding rings." "Do me a favor then," I said bitterly. "Don't wear them when you're in his bed in Miami." Her face fell, but I continued. "Does he know you talk about me?" "I talk about you all the time when I'm with him," she said softly. I could feel the resentment building. "I'm sure you've had plenty of nice things to say about me, right? Like how I'm such a nice guy, just like him. Or maybe you've mentioned that I'm not exactly stellar in bed, not the best provider, or that I leave toenail clippings on the carpet." She looked hurt. "I've never said anything negative about you, Ben. He knows I love you," she said softly. I shook my head, feeling disbelief mixed with anger. "But apparently, not enough to stop you from spending a weekend away with him. You love me, but maybe you're not in love with me. Is that it?" She sighed, her voice wavering. I don't know. I'm confused." "So, you're seeking clarity in the arms of this really nice man who knows you're married but doesn't care?" I shot back. "Has this nice guy been tested for STDs recently?" She winced. "He's not like that, Ben. He hasn't been with anyone in over 2 years." "That's what he says," I replied, my skepticism clear. "But I bet he's not telling you the whole truth. Guys like him see a beautiful, married woman and want to conquer her. That's the real game." Kathy looked away, guilt on her face. I took a deep breath. "Is this nice guy your boss?" She shook her head. "No. He's my boss's boss." "So, you're really moving up, huh? Climbing the corporate ladder with your body instead of your talent and hard work?" Kathy's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not sure what I'm doing, Ben, but your crude approach isn't helping you escape with another man for a weekend in Vegas." I scoffed. I took a steadying breath, my voice softer but thick with emotion. "Let me ask you something. If I beg you not to go, if I get down on my knees and plead with you to stay here with me, will you do it?" She looked down, avoiding my eyes, and shook her head. "I can't, Ben. I promised Roger I'd go with him, and I can't break my word." "So that was his name." I took a breath, feeling the anger surge again. "I see. You can break the vows you made to me 7 years ago, but you can't break a promise to Roger?" Her voice softened. "I'm sorry, Ben. I don't want to hurt you, but I have to do this for me. Please try to understand. In that moment, I knew I'd lost her, but through the pain and misery, an idea surfaced. A final parting shot that might, if nothing else, make her pause and think about the impact of her choices on us. I stood up, glanced briefly in her direction, then turned toward the basement door. Wait here, I said quietly. I want to show you something. Then I'll get out of your way so you can get ready for your trip. I went down to the basement and found the Halloween prop I was looking for. Then I opened our wall safe, took out a piece of paper, grabbed a hammer and some nails, and brought everything back upstairs to the kitchen. Kathy looked confused as she saw me carrying a small wooden coffin, something we usually use as a Halloween decoration. What's going on? She asked, her tone uncertain. I set the coffin on the kitchen table, clearing the sandwich fixings off to the floor. Just bear with me for a moment, I said. We've been together for so long, and before it all ends, I want to show you something. I tapped the top of the 3-foot wooden coffin. This is a coffin. Well, it's a cheap Halloween prop, but it still represents a coffin. Here's the lid, and here's a hammer and some nails. Kathy's expression grew uneasy. And this, I continued, holding up the paper from the safe, is our marriage license. I opened the lid of the coffin, placed our wedding license inside, and closed it with deliberate care. Ben, what in the world are you doing? Put our marriage license back where you found it. Kathy's voice was rising, an edge of panic breaking through. Why, Kathy? I asked, meeting her gaze steadily. It doesn't hold any significance anymore.
It belongs here, in the coffin, ready for its burial.
She blinked rapidly, tears welling up. What are you talking about, Ben? I shook my head, the pain cutting deep. It's proof that we're married. A truth that won't mean anything once you leave to be with Roger tomorrow. Now she was visibly shaken. You don't know that, Ben. I don't even know that. Oh, I know, Kathy. You've made your choice to run off with Roger. And mine. I paused, gripping the hammer.
Mine is to choose divorce.
I took a nail, placed it on the lid, and drove it in with a sharp thud. Kathy flinched at the sound. That's the first nail, I said, symbolizing all the lunches and dinners you had with him. I positioned another nail at a corner and hammered it in. And this one, for the kisses you shared with him. Her mouth quivered as I continued, each nail sealing more than just the coffin. I drove the third nail into another corner. This nail represents your agreement to go away with Roger, the really nice guy. For a weekend in Vegas, I said, lifting the final nail, positioning it at the last corner of the coffin. With one firm hit, I began driving it into the wood. And that's the fourth nail. Kathy's eyes widened as I continued, my voice steady. You know the expression, the final nail in the coffin? It seals things for eternity, solidifying the fate of whatever's inside. Our marriage is in that coffin, Kathy. When you leave for Miami with Roger tomorrow morning, that last nail will seal it, ending our life together, irreconcilably and irrevocably. Her voice cracked as she spoke. You can't mean that, Ben. You can't throw us away over one mistake. I looked at her, feeling both the weight of my words and the sting of her choices. I'm not the one tossing our relationship away, Kathy. You are. I've loved you with every fiber of my being. You're the most beautiful, captivating woman I've ever known. It's been an honor and a joy to call you my wife for these past 7 years. No, I'm not the one ending things here. If I could, I'd climb into that coffin with our marriage certificate and be buried right alongside it, I said, feeling the ache in my chest deepen, just to satisfy my curiosity and maybe twist the knife a bit deeper. If I checked the luggage you're packing, would I find some lingerie? Maybe a negligee you bought just for this trip? Kathy didn't answer, but her tearful expression said it all. I nodded, feeling both devastated and numb. That's what I thought. I took a step back. I'm leaving now. I don't want to witness your final act of betrayal. I'll come back to get what I need for the next couple of weeks after you've left with Roger. While you're in Vegas, though I suspect you'll be too busy with Roger to think of anything else, you might want to consider what items in the house you'd like to keep. I won't be here when you return, but my lawyer will be in touch in the next week or two. I grabbed my jacket, walked out the door, got into my car, and drove away. It was the worst evening of my life. I felt hollow, numb, and utterly lost. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to escape. Eventually, I found a cheap motel, far enough from the airport to avoid any risk of seeing Roger. It didn't matter where I stayed. In the end, he had won. Or maybe I had just lost. My phone buzzed a few times, Kathy's name lighting up on the screen, but I ignored it. I couldn't bear to hear her excuses or listen to her try to explain away what she had done to our marriage. That night, I slept poorly, haunted by visions of them together, their intimacy replacing what I thought we'd shared. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, threw on the same clothes, and found a nearby diner. I ordered coffee and toast, but I could barely manage a few sips. Despite my efforts to shut out thoughts of Kathy, my mind drifted back to her. I could imagine her holding hands with Roger on the plane, sharing quiet smiles in the taxi, eager to reach their room. I had heard about the pain of betrayal, but until now, I never understood just how deeply it could break someone. At 9, I finally called my office to let my assistant know I wouldn't be coming in. She asked if I was feeling unwell, and I simply replied yes, hoping to be back to my usual self by Monday. After hanging up, I noticed a barrage of missed calls from Kathy and a dozen text messages. I didn't delete them, nor did I read any of them. The last message and call were from 7:45, so I assumed she had given up trying to reach me before leaving to be with Roger, the man who had taken my wife. I refused to call him a nice guy anymore. He was anything but that. Revenge on him felt inevitable. I just needed the right moment. To be cautious, I waited until 10:30 to head home and collect what I needed for my new life as a single man. As I pulled into the driveway and opened the garage door, the sight of Kathy's car missing hit me like a ton of bricks. She had likely taken it to meet Roger, avoiding the need for a taxi. I scolded myself for even considering that she might have changed her mind and stayed home. "Get real, buddy," I muttered. "She dumped you. She found a better deal. Some guy who could whisk her away to Miami and pamper her in luxury hotels. Wake up and move on," I told myself. "You might not find someone as stunning as her, but you'll find someone." Despite my own words, I struggled to believe them deep down. As I stepped inside the house, an unsettling silence enveloped me, making everything feel foreign through the fog of a broken heart. It had once radiated warmth and vitality, but now it felt cold and hollow. Moving through the kitchen, I noticed that the remnants of cheese and ham I had scattered on the floor were gone, and the coffin was no longer on the table. It had probably been thrown in the trash, a testament that my desperate attempt to reach Kathy had fallen flat. Lust, I reminded myself, can cloud judgment in profound ways. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom and pushed the door open. There, atop the bed, sat the coffin, its lid partially lifted and a crowbar resting nearby. Someone, presumably Kathy, had gone to great lengths to pry some of those nails loose. Out of curiosity, I checked and found the marriage license I had hidden inside, now placed between the two pillows at the head of the bed. Looks like she didn't even want to grant me that victory, I muttered to myself, turning toward the dresser to grab my underwear and socks. I noticed a pile on the table by the window. 3 sets of beautifully crafted, undoubtedly expensive women's underwear, all torn to shreds, along with a yellow negligee, reduced to ribbons. Atop the pile was a piece of paper with a message written in bold black benair. "I cannot share what I do not own." What on earth? I exclaimed aloud. Glancing back at the bed, I spotted a similar note propped against the coffin, the same message scrawled in the same black ink. Just then, the screech of tires and the crash of 2 cars echoed from outside, followed by the front door bursting open. "Where are you? Oh God, please be here. Please, Ben. You have to be here so I can tell you how wrong I was. How horribly, stupidly wrong I was." A woman's voice screamed through the house. I heard hurried footsteps racing up the stairs, then the sound of stumbling and falling halfway up. She was sobbing uncontrollably, and when she spotted me standing at the top of the landing, she reached out her arms and began to crawl toward me. In all our 7 years of marriage, and 2 years of dating before that, I had never seen her like this. She wore no makeup. Her hair was a wild mess, her eyes swollen and red. Dressed in a Seattle Tacoma sweatshirt, gray sweatpants, and those fuzzy but funny slippers I had jokingly gifted her one Christmas, she looked utterly lost. "Kathy, what's going on? Where's Roger?" I asked, concern flooding my voice. She shook her head violently, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I can't give away what's not mine, Ben. That's what I told him." "Who?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Roger. That's what I told him when he came to pick me up. I can't give away what's not mine." Kathy's voice trembled as she continued her slow crawl up the stairs toward me. "I was dressed just like this." He asked why I wasn't ready to go to Miami with him, and I repeated that I couldn't give away what's not mine. He said, "What the hell does that mean?" And I told him I couldn't go anywhere with him, would never go with him, would never speak to him again because I don't belong to him. My body belongs only to my husband, and I will never share it with anyone else. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she continued. "He called me names, Ben. He said I was a liar and a tease, that I'd wasted his money on airfare and a suite at the Aria. He threatened to ruin my reputation at work, calling me a fraud, and said he'd get me fired. I told him he couldn't get me fired because I quit. She finally reached the top of the stairs and collapsed at my feet, her body racked with sobs. I knelt down beside her, my heart aching for the woman I thought I'd lost. "Kathy, are you saying you really mean it? That you want to be with me?" He was furious. His tires screeched for a block as he sped away. Finally reaching the landing, Kathy wrapped her arms around my ankles, clinging to my legs. "I'm so ashamed," she cried. "I hurt the only person who's always shown me love, who would do anything for me. I betrayed the trust of the man who means everything to me. I'm so sorry." Her sobs were heart-wrenching, and I stood there, stunned, as she held onto me for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a few minutes. I couldn't move. The woman I adored, the center of my universe, the one I had worshipped with every fiber of my being, had shattered my heart. And now, half a day later, she was still clinging to my legs, sobbing. Every fiber of my being urged me to gather her in my arms, to express how deeply I cherished her, and to assure her that we could navigate through this difficult time together. But I remained frozen, unable to move. The events of the past 15 hours flooded my mind. While part of me believed she hadn't actually gone through with anything physical with Roger, the sense of betrayal lingered. A married woman doesn't engage in intimate lunches and dinners, share passionate kisses, or plan a getaway in Miami with another man. Though she had come to her senses before any irrevocable harm was done, the betrayal cut deep. I stood there, gazing at the woman who had, until last night, been my entire world. It was clear she was in as much pain as I was. Our marriage hung precariously on the edge of a dark abyss, and I wondered if we had the strength to prevent ourselves from toppling over. Finally, I reached down and lifted Kathy to her feet, embracing her until her sobs subsided. "Let's go brew some fresh coffee," I suggested. "Thank you, Ben." "Oh, Ben," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude and regret. "I think I might have damaged your car when I pulled into the driveway just now." "Yeah, I heard it. We'll discuss that too," I assured her. I helped her back downstairs and into the kitchen. As we sipped our coffee, I asked, "What made you change your mind? Last night, you seemed so sure about going with Roger. What happened?" She looked at me over her cup, her eyes still red and swollen. "You buried our marriage." "What do you mean?" I asked, puzzled. "You put our marriage license in that coffin and sealed it shut. After you left, I went upstairs to pack, but I kept thinking about our marriage license trapped in that dark place. It felt like our marriage was over, like you were burying it. It was in a place with no air, no light, and it couldn't escape. Then I started to think about all the wonderful things our marriage had given us, all it meant to me. We were so happy together, and I remembered how happy you always made me." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I guess I dozed off," she continued, "because I dreamed I was in that coffin, in that dark place, and I felt like I was suffocating. It felt so real that it woke me up, and I knew I had to open that coffin and get our marriage out. Let it breathe again. Let me breathe again." She chuckled softly. "I never realized how well you hid your tools. It took me at least an hour to find a crowbar, and another half-hour to haul that coffin up to the bedroom and pry the lid open enough to get our license out. I felt possessed, like I had to retrieve it before you could seal the coffin shut. When did you decide not to go with Roger?" I asked. She giggled again, a sound that warmed my soul. "About 2 seconds after you left. I knew I could never go away with Roger, or anyone else. I felt so foolish and ashamed. How could I treat the only man I've ever loved the way I treated you? I tried calling you over and over, but you wouldn't answer. Then I started texting, but that didn't work either. Much later, after I finally pried the coffin lid open enough to reach inside, I thought about how I would tell Roger I never wanted to see him again. I wiped off all my makeup and put on your old sweatshirt and sweatpants. My eyes were already red and swollen from crying, and I wondered how Roger would see me, the real me that you always see and still love. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known, Kathy. Even now, you look perfect to me," I said. And when I realized that, I knew I had to do everything in my power to win you back, to make you love me again. I hadn't packed much yet, but as I started to unpack, I saw the lingerie I bought for the trip with Roger, and I broke down again. Just the sight of it made me sick. They were the final expression of my betrayal, and I had to destroy them. I grabbed my scissors and ripped them all to shreds. They cost a lot of money, but I couldn't bear to look at them. I destroyed them just like I thought I had destroyed you and our marriage. That's when I went to where I kept our marriage license and picked it up to look at it. It's really simple. It says that Kathy Russell and Ben Hardy got married on June 12, 2005. My maid of honor and your best man witnessed it. As I read it, memories flooded back. We stood in front of all our family and friends, promising to be faithful to each other until death. I cried again, realizing I couldn't be with anyone else but you. I told Roger I couldn't share what I didn't own when he came to pick me up. Thank you for sharing. You've given me a lot to think about. Do you think we'll get through this and be okay? Kathy asked. I'm not sure, Kathy. I hope so, but right now I'm uncertain. You nearly broke me last night. I've never felt such pain before. I felt betrayed, alone, and helpless. Can you imagine knowing the person you love most, the one you've always trusted completely, is choosing someone else over you? Tears welled up in her eyes again. Oh, Ben, I'm so sorry. I was out of my mind. I'd do anything to make it right, even die if that would help. Dying definitely wouldn't help. I want you alive, healthy, and, more than anything, I want to trust you again. Luckily, it won't be as hard as it could be because, like you said, we've always been honest with each other. Even last night when you expressed what you thought you felt. What now, Kathy? I'm not sure about you, but I didn't sleep well last night. If it's okay with you, I'd like to have you with me in bed. It might be too soon for that. We don't have to do anything, Ben. I just want to feel you next to me where only you belong, she said, her dark eyes pleading earnestly. I couldn't resist her plea. Okay, but no funny business, Kathy. I'm still upset with you, I replied firmly. A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Anything you say, darling, she said, crossing her heart. She took my arm and led me upstairs to our room. Absolutely no funny business. For a couple of months, things remained uncertain. No matter how hard I tried, there were times when that night would haunt me, leaving me in a bad mood. Kathy seemed to notice those difficult moments and would shower me with love until she became the only thing on my mind. Eventually, she decided to quit her job. When her HR boss asked her why, she opened up about Roger. Though embarrassed, she felt the need to share her experience. Not surprisingly, HR informed her that Roger, the seemingly nice guy, had 3 harassment complaints against him. As a result, he lost his job and any professional references. Kathy was allowed to keep her position and even received a substantial sum of money in exchange for not suing the company. She stayed at her job for about 6 months, and during that time, we discovered we were going to be parents. Life moves forward. Sometimes, you have to give someone a second chance to make things right, even if many would disagree with that decision. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.